Hello and welcome to the Film Podcast. We're getting a lot of franchise sequels lately, some might say too many, but one I was sure might be a worthy addition is 28 Years Later. Let's see what this movie brings to the virus outbreak genre. Definitely not a zombie film. As spoiler-free as possible, what did I think? I've just seen 28 Years Later. The canon of films that we've got with this trilogy is 28 Days Later, then 28 Weeks Later, and now we've got 28 Years Later. So before the lights go off and we're sitting in the dark, let's go home and let's talk about this movie, because there's plenty of things to discuss about 28 Years Later. So the thing that drew me to this is the fact that Danny Boyle has made it. Danny Boyle, most of the time, makes interesting and kind of a bit weird films. And if he doesn't make weird films, there are always parts of the films that are weird. 28 Years Later, I think, is most definitely in the camp of weird. And I wasn't expecting that. I've got to be honest. I wasn't expecting it to be what it was. We'll talk about that in a bit. I went to see the first one at an AMC cinema. And the thing that's interesting about that is I live in the UK. And yes, at some point back in the day, we had AMC cinemas here. It was one of those situations where it was memorable because I always knew AMC cinemas as being American cinemas. And when 28 Days Later came out, all that time ago, I went to see that film in the AMC. Amazing as that is, the thing that was more amazing was 28 Days Later. The thing that I loved about it was how it was made, because it was shot on the Canon XL1S video camera, which was a mini DV camera. We used to have digital video cameras that recorded stuff on cassettes, and Danny Boyle used loads of those cameras to record 28 Days Later. Pretty much the entire film, apart from a little bit at the end, which was shot on 35mm film. And the reason why he did that was because he needed access to central London, if you can all remember. After the prologue happened in the animal testing place, then the rest of it happens in central London. They had to have everything completely deserted, because when Cillian Murphy wakes up, ain't no one around. There's no one around. Everybody's gone. It's all like, what the hell's going on kind of thing. It had this rawness and this kinetic energy about it, partly because of the way it was shot and what it was shot on, and the fact that it looked so awful. Do you know what I mean? It looked horrible on the cinema screen. It looked blocky and pixely and shitty, basically. But that worked perfectly for the look of 28 Days Later. There wasn't anything like it at the time in the cinema, and that's what kind of drew me in. That's what kind of made me think, hang on a minute, this Danny Boyle guy has got something special about the way he makes films. I'd never seen any of his previous movies before. Trainspotting, Shallow Grave, those kind of films. I've seen them now, and they are bona fide legendary films. They sit amongst some of the greatest films ever made, certainly that I've seen, pretty much like 28 Days Later had. They've got this real zany, crazy, raw energy to them. They've all got this mad kineticness about them. Even Slumdog Millionaire, which came many years after 28 Days Later, it's got a conventional kind of story, but it's got these moments in it that are just like, what the fuck, you know? 28 Weeks Later is an interesting one, because 28 Weeks Later isn't really a Danny Boyle film, but it's got some of the Danny Boyle elements in it that you saw in 28 Days Later. It's not as good of a film, of course. It does have a little bit of Danny Boyle in it, but it doesn't have that sort of raw, zany, homemade feel to it. Saying something is homemade, it kind of makes it sound a bit shit, but it's not. It's absolutely not. Imagine using homemade equipment to make a fairly big budget zombie film. Now, I'm saying zombies, right? I'm saying zombies, and that's not the right thing to say, because 28 Days Later and its sequel, 28 Weeks Later, are not really zombie films. They're more like infection films. They're more like films about viruses breaking out and fucking shit up. And the third one is very much that. It's an evolution of the first 28 days later. It doesn't really ignore 28 weeks later, but it's got much more in common with 28 days later than it does with 28 weeks later. And that is 100% a good thing. It's really a good thing. You know, as always on this channel, I've just come out of it, and it's like 28 years later has hit me right in the face with the sense of, what the fuck did I just see? That film has got more in common with something like Cannibal Holocaust, Roger Corman films, all of those insane B-movie horror films, is, I think, where this sits perfectly. This is a high-budget, low-budget film. It really is. Like, I am astonished at the way that they have managed to create that B-movie sensibility and make this. I'm shocked. I'm shocked. And that's a good thing. That is a good thing. That is not a negative thing at all, because I didn't know what to expect. I did not know what to expect with this. As I said, the other two are so different from each other, really. The first one is a very, you know, low budget and as I say, almost homemade thing. But the second one is a big budget, Hollywoody kind of movie, still with little bits of zany madness in, but ultimately it's you know, it's an American blockbuster. This one is its own entire thing. The trailer does not give away any of how completely mad this is. I absolutely loved it because of that. Wowzer. I mean, oh my God. It began, right? And I think, you know, in all honesty, I think that it begins a little bit kind of, oh, okay, we're doing this, are we? You know, this kind of survival thing. And that's okay, because that's what we kind of see in the trailer, really, as well. And then, when we leave the island, shit gets wild. I'm telling you, shit gets wild. And that is where we depart from our expectations, and we end up in B-movie land. And it is glorious, to be honest with you. It's glorious. So let's think about the first movie. Watching 28 Days Later, I kind of got this idea that the first one is an allegory for the bleakness of existence. Lonely bleakness. Mankind, you know, being the engineer of his own demise. Humankind fucked their own shit up, essentially, to put it bluntly, in 28 Days Later. Again, it's not a zombie film, it's an outbreak film. It's a film about an outbreak. Then you've got its sequel, 28 Years Later, which is a kind of message or an idea around imperialism, particularly American imperialism, which, if any of you are watching the news lately, is trying to rear its head again. US military occupations, essentially, is what I got from the second one. And it's quite literally a US occupation. I think you can read into that quite a lot. And I think that's completely intentional. The way that the army are Americans, the troops in there are Americans. I think that the second one is much more of a war film than it is a film about an outbreak, or a film about trying to contain an outbreak. 28 Weeks Later movie is very much a conventional film. It's still got those messages in it. I mean, the elements of the first one as well, they've got a little bit of that sort of army madness kind of thing. If you think about Christopher Eccleston's role, about the general, you know, and wanting to rebuild the population, promising women to his troops. Little bit Full Metal Jackety as well. That sort of unhingedness about it, that sort of guerrilla unhingedness. And that brings us to 28 Years Later, which inevitably is 28 years later, basically. In my Conclave review, I spent the entire review calling the lead actor in that particular movie Ralph. I spent the whole thing calling him Ralph. And Conclave is phenomenally good. No zombies in it. No zombies at all, but it is great. But I spent the whole review calling him Ralph. And his name is actually Rafe. His name is Rafe Fiennes. So I'm not going to do that this time. Anyway, once Rafe Fiennes shows up in this film, it goes from being an interesting, a little bit crazy, and a little bit okay, to being an absolute wonderful piece of cinema. Because Rafe Fiennes makes this, absolutely takes it to another level. I'm telling you. If there's one thing I wish there was more of Ralph Fiennes, I wish the whole fucking thing was about Ralph Fiennes, because that is a phenomenal piece of casting. That is a phenomenal piece of characterization. Oh my good God. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. Ralph Fiennes blows the lid off this completely. It's him and the people he's with at that point where it becomes truly a B-movie, legendary piece of cinema. It becomes a total B-movie classic as far as I'm concerned. Once we get off that island, this film becomes completely unhinged, and I absolutely loved it because of that. As well as Danny Boyle being part of, you know, all of these films, 28 days, weeks, and years, Alex Garland has also been a big part of this. And, you know, Alex Garland has become an absolutely phenomenal director himself. Alex Garland has made some of my favourite films of the past 10 years, one of them being Ex Machina. You've got Civil War, which is another one of his really well thought out, really well done movies. He was the writer of 28 Days Later. He wasn't the writer of 28 Weeks Later. Danny Boyle wasn't the director of 28 Years Later either. They kind of had executive producer roles in that. The symbolism of this movie, you've got that as well, which looks kind of at old wartime footage, as well as old wartime footage. You've got some shots from, I'm not sure what film it is. I'm going to have to look that up. Well, editing me, write what clips are used from what films, because I'm not sure what that is off the top of my head right now, but it's a really interesting technique where they sort of use, you know, older films, particularly shooting arrows, essentially, mixed in with the footage of the training of the archery that they do in this. So 28 Years Later has been made on iPhones, right? It's been made on iPhone 16 or 15s. I'm not sure which one. I mean, it hasn't 100% been made on them. It's been made on, you know, proper cameras as well. If you think back to The Matrix, you'll remember this technique called bullet time. It was basically an awesome technique that sort of stopped time. And this has got that as well. It's got that bullet timey thing going on. But they do it in a really creative way. And I know that it's been done with iPhones. I mean, there's a couple of shots that I've seen, which has got the rig that they used to film some of it. And you can just see like a million iPhones. I mean, the Apple Store will have sold out phones on that day for sure. It's got something about it, this film. The techniques that they use to film it are interesting and fun to watch. And the way that it's edited, it's quite kinetic. It's got a real kinetic feel about the way that it's been put together. It all works together really well, and it's all really fresh. And I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting to watch this film and think, oh my God, you know, the way this has been put together is really unique from a filmic perspective. It's interesting. And it's also fun. That's another thing I wasn't expecting it to be. Fun. All right, I've pulled over because we're going to talk about who's in it, who is in 28 Years Later. So surprisingly, right, and again, something I wasn't expecting was there to be the primary focus of the film is a 12-year-old boy called Spike. He's played by Alfie Williams. I've said this in a couple of other reviews about child actors these days. And, you know, if you look at something like Adolescence, the Netflix thing, and if you look at even Wolfman, right, when I did my review of Wolfman, you can see that child actors these days are pretty damn good. And Alfie Williams, who's essentially the lead of this film, he's amazing. He's able to carry this entire film. He's great. So he plays Spike. Spike is the son of Jamie and Isla. Isla is played by Jodie Cromer, a fellow Scouser, thank you. She's got this kind of illness. We don't really know what the illness is. It holds it back from us. But we know that she's not well. She's suffering from what appears to be a sort of mental illness, I guess. When we see her initially, she's in bed on the island where they live, kind of a bit ranty and a little bit sort of forgetful, and she doesn't really know where she is. She seems to be a little bit delusional, I guess. We kind of see a lot of that during particularly the first half of this film, when we're on the island, when we're on the sanctuary, I suppose you can call it. The sanctuary itself is, I mean, it's quite awesome. It's an island and off the coast of the northeast, essentially, the Newcastle area. It's not too far away from the mainland, but it's also far enough away for it not to be visited by the undead. They're not the undead, they're infected. That's what they are. Not zombies. Not zombies. During, low tide, then a bridge kind of forms between the mainland and the island itself. You can walk across from one end to the other. During the times of the day when the tide is high, the sort of bridge, walkway, whatever you want to call it, isn't there anymore. As we know from previous movies, the zombies, the infected, can't swim. I think that's the case throughout most zombie films. I don't think zombies can swim. I think they just kind of, they can walk into the water, but they don't know what to do because they're just mindless things that are looking for human flesh to consume and whatever. They're not bothered about swimming. They're not bothered about learning how to swim. They don't give a shit. Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I did forgive for his role in Kraven the Hunter, by his role in Nosferatu, well, he's in this as well. Fantastic. How about that? If we weren't focusing so much on Spike being the sort of lead of this film, he would be the lead of this film. But, he's got some problems of his own. He's not the stand-up guy that you'd expect him to be, but of course he isn't, because he's in a Danny Boyle and Alex Garland movie. But, Aaron Taylor Johnson is fantastic. He's just that great balance of a bit crazy, a bit unhinged, but also a solid leader or a solid kind of scavenger or whatever you want to say. His head is in the right place. It's just that he's got some flaws about him. Again, character depth, Character depth is there. Everyone in this, no matter how small their role is, they've all got a fully formed character. And I guess our next most important character, and for me, my favourite character in this whole film, is Ralph Fiennes, right? Well, he's not the character. His character is called Dr. Ian Kelson. It's great. If you've seen the trailer, then you're going to know he looks the business. He is a great character in this film. He's so good. It's fabulous. Ralph Fiennes, as always, firing on all cylinders. Just phenomenal stuff. I would have watched an entire movie about just him because it would have been fascinating and awesome and everything else. Amazing stuff. Loved that performance totally and completely. All right, I've started her up because the light went off and all that. Okay, so let's carry on because we've got plenty to talk about. So the infected, right? In the other movies, the infected are just basically running lunatics. They just run and they run and they run. Whereas previously in other zombie films, zombies have always been slowly kind of shuffling along, essentially. The point where you think, well, anyone can run away from these things because they're just going so slow. Why do people fucking fall over and panic like fuck? Just run away. Just run away like you would normally. You'll be fine. So when you've got all that slow-moving zombie stuff happening, then it's the zombies in numbers that cause the problems, isn't it? When you've got hundreds of them or whatever, they're going to get you, right? They're going to get you and all of this kind of thing, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Now, 28 Days Later gave us a completely new take on zombies, or certainly a take that we'd not seen in the mainstream for quite a long time, where the zombies are quick, they run, and they're crazy and they're insane. They've got this rabid lust about them. Seemingly they can't be stopped. That was another interesting thing about 28 Days Later. It's zombies, or infected, sorry Danny, they were this new sort of scarier, faster thing. So what happens in this is we've got an evolution going on. The infected, I keep calling them zombies, but whatever, they've adapted, they've changed, they've got smarter in some ways. In other ways, they haven't. They're just basically runny, screamy, shouty, crazy things. But in other ways, they have evolved, and they have these kind of super smart ones that are almost human-like, I guess. They seem to be able to do stuff that humans do, especially like think, rather than just all of that. They actually, they do that as well. Don't get me wrong, they do the running, shouty, screamy stuff, but they seem to have thought capabilities. And then you've got these weird, like sluggy, slimy kind of zombies as well. I wasn't expecting that. And it's weird. I don't know, like fleshy, blubbery sort of horrible zombie things. They crawl along the floor and they look like adulty babies. So that in itself, it shows, you know, an evolution of the infected that we've seen in the other films. The other interesting thing is, because time stopped in 2002, what you see is the wasteland that's left behind hasn't changed since then. Two of our characters end up in a Shell service station, a garage, a petrol station, a gas station, as the Americans call it. It looks like it used to when I was younger. I didn't think about that either, the stuff that remains. I mean, we don't really go to any cities or anything like that. We don't do that kind of thing. We pretty much stay in the countryside, essentially. The bits of old civilization that we do see are completely accurate to the time when time stood still in the 28 years, days, weeks universe. It's just great to see that, you know, it's fab. So let's sum up 28 years later. 28 years later, as I said before, has a lot more in common with 28 days later than with 28 weeks later. And that is definitely in its favor, because 28 weeks later is not a bad film. It doesn't seem to have that creativity, and it doesn't seem to have that independent spirit that 28 days later had. But I think 28 years later captures that spirit of the original movie. I think it captures it really well. And I think that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland have come along and said, this is our thing. We're going to experiment. We're going to have some fun. We're going to make it interesting, and we're going to make it different, and we're going to make it a little bit crackers, because that's what I didn't expect this to be. I expected this to be a serious nuts and bolts look at 28 years later. It's got this element of it that is a little bit zany and a little bit B-movie and a little bit perfect, I would say. It's not all great. There are some bits in it where you think, I wish that bit wasn't in it. Because if they'd have gone full on zany insane, then this would have been a true masterpiece of our time, I'm pretty sure. But they don't. They kind of do a little bit of both, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. But the fact that the zany mad stuff is truly awesome just makes me think, I wish they'd have gone the whole hog, and Danny Boyle and Alex Garland will have gone to the studio or whoever and will have said, we're just going to do this the whole way through. I would have adored it. It's the only time in a movie where I've got to the end and gone, what the fuck did they just do? What did I just see? And for that alone, I say this is worth the price of admission. So whatever you do, go and see 28 years later on the big screen, because it really is a great experience to see it there. So this is the Film Podcast. Thank you for watching. Take good care of yourself. There's so many weird things going on in the world right now. I just hope there isn't a zombie outbreak on the horizon either. We almost had that with COVID, so, you know, maybe that bit's done. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again soon.